We're back. Episode 12. Clarify everything, Matt and Shane. You guys know the drill. The thing that's kind of cool, we're seeing consistent numbers on the old interwebs here. We're averaging between 15 and 20 views per episode now.
Oh wow, we're somebody now.
Dude, we're somebody. We're growing. Our
I
latest
appreciate
episode
I
just,
appreciate all 20 people
dude, I know.
that are viewing.
Hey, we still have a few episodes, from back in the day when there was just two views and it was you and me. All right.
I know, I know. I appreciate all 20 people.
And
Trying
I
trying to
can't
trying to bring
I
some truth.
oh yeah. I genuinely cannot stand to hear my own voice. So outside of editing the podcast, I don't listen. And so that means that's 20 real people.
I can't listen to I talk too much, so I need to have less voice. I need to have less of me talking.
Maybe it's just my grandpa listening to it 20 times in a row. That could be also possible.
I mean, I would appreciate your grandpa 20 times. He sounds like a pretty cool person. So
We'll see, we'll see. There's a bunch of things that have happened lately in the forms of like tech news, science news. And so I think today I'm going to let you take your pick on some ideas and topics that are interesting me currently. All right.
all right, cool.
All right. Number one, all those women going to space, Blue Origin
Uh-huh.
flight.
Yep.
Number two, the whole quantum computer, supercomputer debate that's going on. Honestly, it basically said a quantum processor solved a problem in 20 minutes that would take a supercomputer millions of years. Then a supercomputer then did it or did a part of it in about 2 hours.
Yeah.
So there's this kind of tug of war going on between quantum and super, right? And what's like the difference there? And then I think the last one was, let's see. Oh, that's what it was. There's like this, like, okay, basically a black market has arisen for weight loss drugs on the internet. But when they say weight loss drugs, they're talking about GLP-1s, right?
Yeah.
And so I was interested in what the breakdown of what actual GLP-1s are and how they work and like what is the actual, I don't know, maybe science behind why, these things are the first drug maybe, or one of the first drugs that like have seemed to take people by storm.
I mean, we might be able to do all three.
All right,
I mean,
perfect.
there's not there's we can oh man, but if we start talking about Ozempic and GLP-1, then we'll dive into a hole there. So maybe we'll save that one for the end.
All right.
The quantum one's actually pretty easy. The answer to the quantum versus supercomputer debate is always been the same. It's been the same answer since the beginning of time, since we first started computing things. That answer is math. That's really is what it comes down to. So a quantum computer, as we've talked about before, using quantum superposition creates a third state. So you're not, or a number of third states, exponential third state. So you're not actually just using a one or a zero to
Right.
compute, which is what a standard computer does. All of our current mathematical equations that are used around computing and around science use that same binary processing speed. Okay, your clock goes this fast, you gates move this much, and bits and blah blah blah. So if we, and this is a very technical term, if we rejigger some of those equations,
Yep.
then we might be able to. That's a super technical term. If we mess around with some of the variables in those equations, there's a lot of happening in the field of math about different ways of computing answers. And we like saying with math, there's always a right answer. There is only one way to do it, but that's not necessarily true. When you start getting into complexities, there's a bunch of different ways to arrive at that correct answer. And we've learned, through theorems that exist in various levels of calculus that there are cheat codes, how you can go faster in certain places. So as a bunch of really, really smart people that are messing with mathematics out there start coming up with new and interesting ways to apply some of the same computational principles that have existed for so long, then we could theoretically accelerate computation using existing compute structure.
Okay.
And then if we take that a step further, quantum computers create a different compute structure, but a lot of that is theoretical. A lot of that is making the assumption that it's going to do certain things. So maybe it does do those things faster and maybe it doesn't. The one thing that we can count on from quantum mechanics is that it never does what you expect it to do. So if we're thinking, oh, this is exactly how it works, that's how you know you're wrong. Oppenheimer's famous quote when he started teaching said, "What do you know about quantum mechanics?" Well, I think I have a pretty good idea. Well, then you know you're wrong. That's how quantum mechanics works. So when we start messing with quantum mechanics, we're not entirely sure how those things are going to turn out until we actually build it, which is why Microsoft ended up going sideways weeks and weeks ago when they said, oh, our Marjana thing is like we've figured out quantum computing and this many qubits, and we're doing superposition a little different way. And at this point, it's still a lot of experimental work, which is no different than things that happened 50 and 100 years ago, 200 years ago, when we first started messing around with chemistry and quantum
Right.
mechanics. But now it's all over the internet. So there's
Hmm.
all kinds of talk about it. These many people worked on it, things like that. So there's a lot more visibility around it. But if you look at these two things, the difference between seconds and hours is pretty big. When you're talking about how fast something can engage in computation. But that doesn't necessarily mean that all of the work that is going into modern supercomputers is not good and is not going to accelerate some of the existing algorithms and the existing computation that we are doing. And we've seen those accelerations take place over the last 100 or so years, and we're going to keep seeing it. It's
Right.
going to keep happening. So there's no, when we first started out with computers, in the 30s and 40s, and we're going to abacus, we're going to turn it into, what the Colossus, and we're going to keep going from there. Those first computers that were first doing work, they were based on gates and algorithms and switches and things like that. We're just applying new technology to some of these old standards and applying new math to some of these old standards. So as that starts to happen, will a supercomputer ever outperform a quantum computer? I don't think so. But we got to figure out quantum computers first.
Right.
We got to get them actually working and doing things. And in the meantime, let's not discount the fact that we have these computers that are doing hundreds of petaflops, exaflops at this point, which is a tremendous amount of processing time, floating point operation, which is a exaflop is quadrillions of
Hmm.
them. Actually, it's quintillions. So it's a massive amount of computation that's taking place and can do great things with it. So I think that even though there's a debate, it's like most other things, we're turning science into a religious war.
Hmm.
It's the same thing that happens with artificial intelligence. Oh, we're trying to build AGI. Oh, we're trying to build ASI. We're trying to do this. Look, man, we're just trying to finish our schoolwork at this point. Let's not get all wrapped up in like building this giant thing. Like let's do the cool stuff that can apply to us right now. Otherwise, the work we're doing gets so far ahead of what is immediately practical that people don't really care about it. Which kind of brings us into the next topic of, a bunch of ladies going up into space. So, so Blue Origin's Bezos's company has quietly, because SpaceX is much louder about it, been doing some cool space stuff. Now that doesn't mean that SpaceX is bad. They've been doing some cool space stuff. We talked
Right.
about that. They caught a friggin' rocket
Yeah.
like that. That's cool shit. Regardless of what anybody's talking about, that's cool shit. So Blue Origin's also doing some cool shit. They've got completely automated flights that are
Hmm.
doing some cool stuff, and that's pretty impressive. So the most of SpaceX is doing the same thing, so I don't want to take away from the capabilities of that. And honestly, I mean, it's pretty repetitive. It's big math and it's really repetitive, but you should still have somebody in a position where they can actually recover the craft if things
Yeah.
go sideways, so that a human can still compute outside of variables better than a computer can. So I think that these five women demonstrated a pretty significant amount of trust getting into a spacecraft that was completely automated and then letting it fly them around, up into space, things like that, and then come back down. I'm going to keep my opinion about the publicity stunt around this to myself, with Katy Perry kissing the earth and holding a flower up when there's memes about the two astronauts that spent 291 days or whatever they did longer in orbit than they were supposed to, and they didn't kiss the earth when they first came back down. There's a little bit of
Those are
drama and
hardened
things like that in
professionals.
there.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Well, then maybe they should have put some hard professionals in space instead of Katy Perry. But
Whoa, Katy Perry's professional.
oh, sorry. So, but honestly, I don't know if that's super relevant.
Hmm.
That they were, the thing that I continually look at with space flight and the work that is going on around it right now is that we're on this trajectory, pun intended, to commoditize space travel, just like we
Hmm.
commoditized air travel. I think that we lose track of how fast some of these things happen when we're sitting in the, I don't know, the microcosm of our life on a daily basis. The first airplane that flew, the Wright brothers, and then the first astronaut on the moon were pretty close to 100 years apart.
Right.
That is a psychotically short amount of time when we
Yeah.
think about the amount of technological change that took place in there. And if we think about that first astronaut on the moon, it was about 70-ish, 75 years ago. So in that space, and I keep having to, I want to correct this down, like, oh, no, it was only 50 years ago. But that 50 years ago was yesterday. It was actually more like 75 years ago.
Hmm.
So when we think about that amount of time, if we add another 25 years to it, 100 years going from, kite string and sailcloth and wood in somebody's backyard, a bicycle, getting off the ground, to putting a person on the first satellite that orbits our planet. And then 100 years from that first satellite orbiting our planet, what happens in the next 25 years? So
Hmm.
we're seeing some really cool advancements. And I think that that's part of it, is that we were able to put Katy Perry in a
Yeah.
spaceship.
Yeah.
It's like that sounds like the beginning of like a joke. So
Yeah.
Katy Perry was in a spaceship,
Yeah.
and it's like it sounds like the beginning of a joke. So we were able to do that. And honestly, as much as I think the normal human population will be embarrassed and angry by the fact that Jeff Bezos's girlfriend was the pilot for this automated flight, there are clearly some perks to fucking a billionaire. So I mean,
Yeah.
you
I
get
mean,
to
hey,
ride a spaceship, but the
it's okay, but I can't say I blame her. You know what I mean?
but the part that I think there's three things about this that bug me in three completely different directions. The first one is, don't call somebody a pilot if they're just warm in a seat.
Yeah.
That does a disservice to pilots,
Right.
male and female, whoever they are, that have a tremendous amount of skill and are there in case something goes sideways.
Hmm.
They are sitting in that chair. Now, I don't know who else was on the flight. I know I didn't actually look it up because I was ready to bash my head to the wall, things like that when I saw it. So I don't know if there was an actual other pilot in there, but calling a person a pilot who has not earned that distinction does a disservice to the people, men and women, over a number of years who have both lost their lives to get into spacecraft and have acquired the skills to be pilots to get into a spacecraft and do some tremendous things with a
Right.
spacecraft. Because by saying that Lauren Sanchez was a pilot of a space mission is putting her up there with people that actually landed the goddamn space shuttle. So
Mm.
it's those are that distinction needs to be made. Like saying, oh, because we're going to look at Wikipedia 50 years from now or 100 years from now, and somebody's going to say, oh, here's Lauren Sanchez. She was one of the pilots of a space mission. It was an automated space mission.
Right.
It's like put an asterisk in there or something. I mean, come on. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that recreational space flight is still going to cost money. It's
Yeah.
still going to take resources. And nobody's in a position to really tell people what to do with their money,
Hmm.
to say, oh,
Yeah.
well,
Go see the
you got
Titanic.
yeah, to do that. So you could do whatever you want. You can get
Yeah.
in a spaceship and, go fly up to space recreationally and stuff like that. So nobody's in a position to do that. So going completely the other direction, if Jeff Bezos wants to spend billions of dollars from his slave labor that he gets at Amazon to put people in space, you can't get mad at Jeff Bezos for deciding to put people in space. It's his billions of dollars.
Yeah.
Who you should get mad at is the people who are still spending money to give Jeff Bezos billions of dollars so that he can put people in space.
Yep.
So, so once billionaires have money, you can't get mad at them for doing stupid things with their money.
Yeah. Doing
You can
billionaire
get
things.
right. You can get mad at them for being stupid because I
Yeah.
mean that's it. But I don't necessarily think that doing this as a gimmick is a bad idea.
Hmm.
If you're trying to get attention for your company that is trying to do unmanned space or unpiloted automated space flight, you just did it. You just put four women in a spaceship that have never been in a spaceship before, never trained, put them in goofy looking flight suits and flew them into space and brought them back. Like that's a pretty serious thing. Like so you can't be knocking that. You can't be like, oh, Jeff Bezos, you just wasted all kinds of money. Well, let's just say that the moon landing was wasting all kinds of money. We blew a ton of cash to put people
Oh
on the
yeah.
moon, and we haven't done anything with that since. We haven't gone up there. We don't have a moon base or anything like that. We did a bunch of cool experiments, but we haven't done anything since then. So I don't think that saying, "Oh, it was a giant waste of money." I don't think that's true. Like it's not. It's depends on how you classify a waste of money. Should Jeff Bezos spend billions of dollars to try and address global hunger? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean that he should not
Yeah.
spend it on putting people into space, even if it's his girlfriend and a couple of other women and Katy Perry. I'm gonna keep picking on Katy Perry.
Wait,
And
just to set the record straight. All right. I looked it up. It says that she's a journalist, but also happens to have her helicopter pilot's license, which,
okay.
spacecraft, helicopter, I mean, they're basically the same thing, right?
Pretty
Like, I
close. It's
mean,
pretty close.
it's
Pretty close.
like this
Pretty
journalist
close.
probably knows how to fly a spaceship. I mean, ah.
It's pretty close. So, I mean, all right. So, okay. So she's a helicopter pilot. Now, I'm gonna split hairs a little bit, and I'm admitting I'm splitting hairs right off the bat because, as Shane has alluded to, flying a fucking spaceship is different than flying a helicopter.
Thing is, like, there's a reason that like flight schools are like rotary based or like fixed wing. And
Yeah,
it's like, dude,
because they're
yo,
different.
do you even know how this works? Like, if anything, like, okay, granted, if you're smart enough to be a journalist for like Daily Wire, hey, oh, no, I'm joking, I'm joking.
Well, I'm gonna go the other direction. I'm gonna go the other direction. Honestly, it's one of the phrases I heard a long time ago, and it was said in the Apollo 13 mission, and then Tom Hanks
Mm,
repeated it in the Apollo 13 movie.
mm,
You know, they get into a position and things start happening, and he said, "Well, Sir Isaac Newton has the wheel."
yeah,
So there is a point, and that point exists from the moment that those engines ignite,
right,
where you're kind of at the mercy of physics.
yeah,
So you're not going to pilot your way out of a flat spin. You're not going to be able
no,
to pilot your way out of a shitty reentry.
right,
Like it's some pilots, and this is where I want to give credit, have done some truly miraculous things and been able to
mm,
recover some amazing stuff. But the reality is moving at 15, 17,000 miles an hour, re-entering an atmosphere at 5,000 degrees Celsius. Like what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do?
yeah.
Hold on, I'm gonna pull up. We got to remember that like shit's happening in
Dude,
movies.
I
It's
could
not
know to
real.
pull up, bro. Like,
Right. Except when you're re-entering, you pull up, you just change the direction of the heat shield, you
dude.
probably die. So
Here's my
it's
thing. If I'm going to space on a Blue Origin flight, I want at least like a F-16 pilot there just for moral support. You know what I mean?
right.
Like I want some dude who even if he doesn't know what he's doing, I want him to tell me he knows what he's doing and that if shit starts going crazy, I'm gonna look at him and be like, "Yo, lock it in,
All
bro."
right.
Like
What do we do? What do we do? How do we get out of
then he's
this?
gonna be like,
So
"Pray," and I'm be like,
right. Don't die. So the third point that I have, no, not the piloting and not the is that I think that the idea of competitive space is really important.
mm,
Is we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to try this. Because if you're commoditizing a product, you've got to have more than two people or even one person in the case of SpaceX in the space. Now, we've
right,
got a lot of other commercial space companies that don't get a lot of attention. They don't get a lot of. So I want to point out that Bezos has been putting a lot of people up in orbit. He's been doing this pretty often. This is the one that got the most attention recently, but he's been doing it a lot. William Shatner went up there, so Captain Kirk actually got to go to space.
pretty
So
dope.
there's some cool things that are happening there. And I think space is cool.
Yeah,
I know I bash like going to Mars and things like that quite a bit, but that's because I think that we're not being transparent, not
yeah,
because we shouldn't do it. I think it's because we have a lot of things we have to overcome, and we should talk about all of them. They should all be up on the wall. We got to build better people. We got to build better spacesuits. We got to have better fuel. We got to have better materials. We got to do all this stuff. And are they working on it? Sure. Is it classified? Not really. Do they want to not share it because you know what I have to do? I have to stop using rhetorical questions every time I'm talking. This is getting out of control. I just realized I did it 5 times in a row. So,
those are the questions that need to
so
be asked.
right. So there should be some transparency. There should also be some competitive advantage. If you're making a really bitchin' material, then you shouldn't be telling everybody you're making a bitchin' material. You should say, hey, we got this covered.
Yeah,
Don't worry about this. We got this handled. And then when your ship comes out, you say, hey, look at this bitchin' material. We can ablate like gamma rays off of
mhm,
this bitchin' material. All right, man, let's go the hell to Mars. Like that solves
yeah,
a giant problem for us right there. Let's get the hell out of here. the assumption that things will be miraculously solved, I think, is to our detriment. I
Hmm.
think that's part of where I'm going with the conversation in the third piece of this is that, oh, okay, well, we put a bunch of women up into space, but the part that goes back to the competition aspect of it is we are simultaneously not giving credit to the women who have actually put us into space,
Hmm.
the women who have worked at NASA, who have,
Like that movie, I forget what it's
yeah,
called.
yeah, Hidden Figures,
Yeah, Hidden
who have
Figures. Yeah.
done the majority of the computational work. You know, the anecdote, Jack Black's mom, who actually worked for NASA and wrote a
Yeah.
lot of the code during the Apollo missions.
Chicken
Uh,
jockey.
yeah, these women were massive contributors into this space. And
Hmm.
regardless of what you feel about DEI or any of this other
Hmm.
crap that we're talking about right now, oh, pro DEI, non DEI, whatever, you cannot deny that women have contributed mightily to the
Oh yeah.
STEM effort that is required to put us into spacecraft and put us into orbit and put us onto other planets. So by taking a bunch of women who have not necessarily contributed in that scientific way and making them the forefront of
Yeah.
this event right now, I think that there should be, to create that competition, you also have to recognize your foundations. What
Right.
did this? The people, all the people who have made tremendous contributions to putting us into orbit.
Yeah.
So if we lose track of those three things, we don't actually think about the cool parts that are actually happening. If we say, okay, hey, this was an automated flight and it was really bitching, and that's a big deal. We really want that. And then, okay, here's some cool stuff that we're working on. We can spend money on whatever we want because we're a bunch of crazy billionaires. This is not the
Hmm.
first round of crazy billionaires we've had. Anybody want to Google Rockefeller? There's some crazy billionaires. Now they were
Yeah.
billionaires at that point in history who have done crazy shit. And then third, let's not forget in that spirit of competition that there are people that have foundationally helped that are being overlooked in the work that they've done. And that's something that chronically has happened throughout history is we have not paid attention to people who have made significant contributions to an effort because we've tried to elevate ourselves.
Yeah.
And if we move on to your third point, your Ozempic, GLP-1 point, there have been weight loss drugs since there have been weight loss drugs.
Yeah.
Since weight loss has been a thing, there's been weight loss drugs. The mechanism that most of them work on is the same. And GLP-1 is a little bit different, but it restricts diet, so you're not as hungry, you don't want to eat as much food, and then there's other conversations going on right now that it works like kind of a chemical gastric bypass, like your stomach feels full sooner, and you don't want to eat as much food. And then because of that, you might have more energy. And there's all this, but chemically, we're talking about a very, very simple mechanism on top of a very, very complex system.
Hmm.
The mechanism is we put food in here, it gets burned up here, it gets spread out here, it
Mm.
makes us do this.
Yeah.
Like that's it. That's the mechanism. Like it goes in, we process it, it comes out, either becomes energy or it becomes waste. Period. That's all that happens. That's the whole process. Now that covers a massively complex system that has to deal with pH and chemical bonds and the ingestion of material and the repurposing of material. And the problem with this scenario is that we're presenting science and technology and chemistry to interact with a system that is ancient by
Hmm.
actual definition. Our digestive system is astonishingly similar to what it was a million years ago. It
Right.
hasn't changed all that much. So, if that system has remained relatively stable, what has led to modern obesity? What has
Mm.
led to modern overfat humans? And what's led to that is not necessarily the introduction of new habits, although that is part of it, or excuse me, rather a change in the chemistry of our bodies. It's a change in our habits. We're eating more food in a single sitting, we're moving less, and we have more abundance. So a lot of developed countries are starting to see that standard abundance curve that happened to the royalty, 100 or 1,500 years ago. Oh, they had a lot of food and they were overweight, and it was good. You wanted to paint curvy people into pictures because it showed that they had a lot of resources. And we talked about that a little bit before. So now let's introduce a chemistry. Let's introduce a drug, a chemical of some type that interferes with this process somehow. Now Ozempic took the world by storm when it first came out, did all kinds of crazy things because it was had relatively low incidence of side effects. And when I say relatively, because it still
Relatively.
had side effects, had relatively low incidence of side effects, and it worked pretty well. When I say pretty well, is because it was a relatively high percentage, subjectively high percentage of people who were losing weight when they were
Mhm.
taking the drug. But like anything, if something works, somebody's going to find a way to make it work better.
Yeah.
Well, if I took two, why don't I take four? If I take four, why don't I take six? Well, as we've talked about, the dose makes the poison. So taking four and six might not necessarily make as much sense as taking one or two. But in the black market, you don't have doctors that can regulate. You don't have pharmacies that can regulate. And there's this current crazy going on that we have to have this war on intelligence. So people that are actively regulating based on science are trying to stifle my independence. They're trying to stop me from doing what I want to do. There is a very good chance that if your physician is telling you not to do something, I'm not saying this all the time, but there's a very good chance that if your physician is telling you not to do something, it's not because they're trying to stifle your independence, it's because they're trying to stifle death. So if you do something your physician tells you not to do against medical advisement and you are injured by that, they still have to treat you. But there's a whole big I told you so kind of wrapped up in there. Like,
Yeah.
don't do this thing. But going back to the dose making the poison and basic chemistry, and honestly, I think we should clip this and send this to Matt, other Matt, and have him judge me for what I'm about to say. But we
Chemistry
know,
math.
yeah, we know a PhD chemist who's amazingly good at what he does and has his own company and has been working for a while. But the dose making the poison, if you have sodium by itself, it'll
Hmm.
kill you.
Yeah.
If you have chlorine by itself, it'll kill you. You put the two of them together, and your steak tastes pretty good.
Yeah.
Like
Tastes
it's
pretty
that's
good.
sodium and chlorine together. You got sodium chloride, you got salt, you got table salt. It's like, oh yeah, this is great. Now if you change that the chemical equations in there, you got more sodium, and you start dealing with crazy acids and stuff like that. Things get all weird and out of control, which Matt would be able to tell us all about. But that understanding that chemistry is this very complex, very strange natural process where things do, it's easy to understand on surface, but then when you open it up, it turns into this maelstrom of different things
Yeah.
coming together and coming apart, doing all this crazy stuff. So when we start talking about wanting to interfere with substantial processes like fat metabolism in the body, that is a huge part of the metabolic process that exists inside of us, and we don't know what it's going to do over time.
Right.
So there are people who are saying, "Oh, well, I'm going to take Ozempic and it's going to be just fine." These same people are the ones who were freaking out about a new vaccine
Mm.
or that a vaccine causes autism, both of which are ridiculous and untrue. Well, the new vaccine is true, but vaccines don't cause autism. So that these are the same people that have made those decisions. Now, not all of them, obviously, but you can't have both. If you trust in the science in one place, it's the same science somewhere
Yeah.
else. Now, I know there's a lot of conversation about wrapping things up in different propaganda. We've talked about that before, so it's entirely possible that those things are included. But that's the whole purpose of a mass of information. If enough things are happening, then you've got to say, okay, this is how it works. So is it good that we now have a bunch of black? I'm not going to ask a rhetorical question. Oh
No
my
more
God.
rhetorical questions.
No more rhetorical questions. I'm punch myself in the face if I ask a rhetorical question. I don't think that GLP-1 drugs being sold on the black market is any different than any other kind of drug being sold on the black market.
Right.
There is a huge number of them. One of the examples that I very much like is muscle relaxants. Muscle relaxants are against the law in most parts of the United States unless they're prescribed.
Muscle relaxants. Like what's like an example of a muscle relaxant?
Robax.
Oh. Like what? Like do they just make you like chill?
No, muscle relaxers just relax muscles. That's all they do.
Really?
So
Wait,
it's like if
actually,
you have,
hold up. One second. Before you explain this, I gotta pause real quick. Huzzah! All right, we're back.
all right, we're back.
All right,
So
muscle relaxant.
muscle relaxants are a pretty common treatment practice, throughout the world, and they're actually prescribed pretty commonly in the
Hmm.
United States. They have fairly low incidence of side effects, and they do, like you said, they just kind of make you chill.
Hmm.
They help to relax muscles, relieve pain, knots, tension, things like that. They're pretty damn effective, and they're so broad. You can have very potent ones, that can kill you. Then you have some over-the-counter ones where you have to take 500 of them for them to actually do any significant damage to you.
Like
But
Tylenol.
yeah, yeah, it's a lot of them. But some of them they can be abused, just like any other drug, just like anything else that's out there. I mean, although I don't know anybody who'd want to abuse ibuprofen, it can be abused like any other drug. So they are outlawed in a large percentage of the United States, most notably in California. So there is an entire black market underground to buy Robax, which is a Canadian muscle relaxant mixed with ibuprofen.
Hmm.
And they actually try and stop it at the border and things like that. It's all crazy. And for anybody who's actually wondering, more Robax is smuggled into the United States through Canada than fentanyl.
Through
So
Canada.
yeah.
Okay, I was gonna
So
say there's a lot of
so
fentanyl.
so so because there's a black market for this drug. You can sell it, out of the back of your van, stuff like that. Now, granted, because it's so easy to get, because there's so much of it's brought in, it doesn't fetch like this huge price or anything like that. But this is a muscle relaxant.
Hmm.
And it's something that people take all the time. If you're an old dude like me and you do jujitsu, then you're like, I need to get me some muscle relaxants because at the end of the day, there's all kinds of muscles that are moving in ways you didn't even
Oh
think were
God.
possible. So it is commonly used for therapeutic purposes, just like painkillers and all that other fun stuff that we use, but it is outlawed for reasons that don't make a lot of sense. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that those reasons didn't originally make sense, and it
Right.
doesn't mean that we shouldn't keep certain drugs outlawed. I don't want to get into that kind of, weird conversation. But if you outlaw a drug, then you're going to develop a larger black market. So the same kind of thing is happening with GLP-1 drugs. You can only take so much, but it's pretty easy to make it in a generic. So if you can get
Hmm.
a ton of it, you can sell it on the black market. If you get it
Yeah.
manufactured overseas, you can sell it on a black market. And then it's cheaper than the name brand. So is it going to help people to lose weight? Probably.
Hmm.
That was another rhetorical question, so I need to hit myself in the face. But I think the risks associated with any black market drug are always going to be the same as the risks associated with any regular drug. It's the same drug, except you're
Right.
worried about manufacturing impurity and all those other crap that you got to deal with anytime you're not buying it from a reputable vendor. I think, though, that the challenge we have with GLP-1 drugs is that, like most other previous weight loss drugs, it's going to make people think they can continue with bad behavior
Right.
and then cause problems. Robin Williams did a bit while he was still alive, and it's funniest human that I've seen in most of my life. And
Oh
he
my
he did a
God.
bit. Is so funny. He did a bit on Broadway, and he joked because, for those that don't know, Robin Williams had huge drug problems for a long time.
Oh yeah.
But he joked when he was on Broadway, is like that recreational drugs didn't often do the same stuff that over-the-counter drugs did. And he was talking about some drug that had side effects. He says, I don't understand side effects when they're so big that like you don't want to take the drug. Like,
Hmm.
so one of the drugs to take, it's like the drug I haven't taken, the effect of the drug is a painkiller. Okay, great. Well, that sounds great. The first side effect is losing control of your bowels. I don't know what you're thinking, but that's not a side effect. That's a fucking effect. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
so that's the same kind of thing you have to look at with GLP-1 style drugs is if you take a lot of it and then engage in behavior that is going to trigger these chemical reactions within your body, then the side effects are going to increase. So if one of the side effects is incontinence, and then you eat the fattiest meal you can imagine, and you pound down like three-quarter pounders, and then take five GLP-1 drugs, man, I'm not going to want to be around you for a couple of days as your body starts trying to normalize all of that stuff. So same risk with anything else on the black market.
Yeah.
It's not anything crazy that's going on right now, although people in general are going to they're going to flock to it because, oh, it's an obesity epidemic and it's in my genes and all this other stuff.
Yeah, it's
You
in
know
your
what?
genes, bro.
Yeah.
Size
You
50.
know, you know what else is in your genes? Taco Bell.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
probably what's going on. I don't blame Taco Bell. It's a
Oh my
people,
God.
we had the whole super side me thing years
Hmm.
ago, and like, oh, it's so many calories. But as much as I don't want to come out and say what I think this comes down to is the system, like I said, is complex, but the mechanism is simple. We're dealing
Right.
with thermodynamics at this point. You're putting energy into a system, that energy is being extracted from the food that you're eating and it's entering your circulatory system, and then you do things with it. So if you burn more than you put in, you will get smaller.
Yeah.
It's just a question of what is getting smaller. Is it muscle? Is it fat? Is it volume? Is it bone? Is it so if you're doing exercise, then you balance your protein and then you eat a healthy amount of carbohydrates, and they're interesting, advanced fibrous carbohydrates, not just sugar all the time. And you're eating you're you're eating the right kinds of protein that can be developed properly. You're keeping your fat intake at a moderate level, which before this century was really all that you could do as a human, up to that point. Like you had to eat a lot to eat a lot, but now you can eat a little and you're actually eating a lot. So before that, that's what we did because we didn't have a whole lot of choice. And now
Hmm.
we have choice and we're, letting our instincts overpower us. And we all probably know what's better. Some people I don't think do,
Yeah.
but we're making choices not to do that. And I'm one to talk. I have a sweet tooth. I have a fatty tooth. I'll put butter on damn near everything. So I'm not trying to
Butter.
judge people for not doing it. I'm struggling the same way, but I know that the lifestyle changes are what's going to do it and not going out and taking a weight loss drug,
Yeah.
especially one that you get on black market. And I'm going to caveat all of this with going back to the physician. If you go to your doctor and you say, I'm struggling to lose weight, and your doctor says, here's a GLP-1 drug, take it like this, and you do that, you will probably see success because the doctors have done the homework. They've
Hmm.
done the science. They've read through the studies. They have to. But if
Hmm.
you decide you're gonna, screw my doctor, I know better than him because I did one Google search, and then you're gonna get on the dark web and you're gonna order 500 pills and you're gonna take it, man, you better put up a YouTube video because I don't know
Yeah.
how that chemistry is gonna work.
Yeah. I actually have an interesting take on a couple of these things, but first, I just want to say something. So I know you don't really look at the analytics of like who watches our show as much as I do, but 70% of our viewers are 45 or older, right? And so you guys are probably gonna like laugh at me for this, but you were saying like Robin Williams is like the legend, right? And I loved Robin Williams. But the thing was, is I remember distinctly the day when I first saw Robin Williams like special versus like his movie, right?
Yeah.
So I remember what was happening was I go to put on like I was at my grandparents' house. Papa, you're gonna hear this. I was at their house. I distinctly remember this, and I go, "Oh, like they're playing Robin Williams special. I want to listen to that." And my grandma goes, "I don't like Robin Williams. He's raunchy, right?" And I go, "What, Mrs. Doubtfire? Like, what are you talking about?" And I play that, and I remember watching this with my grandpa, and I was like, "This is like who is this person? You know, like I've never
Yep.
seen this before." The same thing happened to me with Eddie Murphy's like Delirious, I think it was, and I was like,
Yep.
"Oh my, like who are these people?" Just these old legends, like went to kids' TV shows. But the thing I wanted to say about the GLP-1s and the weight loss drugs is, firstly, I actually kind of think GLP-1s are good, if that makes sense. Just not just to play devil's advocate here, but the side effects are bad, right? But I think that a side effect of obesity is a lower quality of life. And so I think when you look at it from that perspective, it's going, all right, have you tried everything? Like, have you, or are you really stuck? Like, is it really that bad? And is it really deteriorating from your life? Like, are you struggling with your weight so much where it's in fact impacting your family? Like, can you not play with your kids maybe? And it's like, these are things where it's, all right, maybe I'll take the risk, that these side effects might occur. These things might not be the best for me, but I know that it'll immediately help me and improve my life. And I think that that is something that is almost overlooked, especially by like the scientific community, where
Yeah.
we've talked about it before, where academia and science and technology sometimes forgets like the human aspect of a lot of things. Where I think same thing with like gastric bypass surgeries, like liposuction, things like this, where it's like being overweight. not only just impacts like your life and like, just your everyday how you feel, but also impacts like your self-image, your confidence. There's a lot of things that are associated with that. Like I think there was a stat that came out that there like hasn't been a president under like 6 foot, and it's like these types of things like confidence in yourself, the way your appearance looks, impact like your career. They impact other things just on the way you feel about yourself. And so I think that if a GLP-1 prescribed by your doctor is, the way by which you can achieve happiness or, be fulfilled in within yourself. And when you look in the mirror, you're content. I think that that is a good thing. But something I do think is funny is weight loss drugs have been around for a long time. They've been under the terms of, D-ball, tren, these types of things. And they have such a negative connotation. I'm not saying for not for good reason. They do bad things, they do some bad things. But I think it's funny now that they've hit almost like a mainstream, and then now all of a sudden these weight loss drugs are like they're good, they're for the soccer moms, they're for, dad who just doesn't have time to work out. Like it's like you guys could have been blasting gear this whole time and you would have been made fun of, but now you're blasting GLP-1s and it's like, oh, I mean, what can I say? I just want to be healthy. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like the TRT
Though,
wave. Like it's like the same
yeah,
thing.
yeah, you're not wrong though. And yeah, to your point, I don't think you're playing devil's advocate, because I think we're saying the same thing.
Mhm.
Medication
Yeah.
chemistry that is well structured and well
Right.
used can improve life. That's the
Right.
reason we make the choices that we do, across the board. So I don't think weight loss drugs have ever been bad.
Right.
I think how they're used or marketed or presented often can create problems. But if this is something that will improve your life, if
Yeah.
it's something that will make you feel better, if it's something that is working for you, then absolutely do it.
Mhm.
And if your decision to buy it on the black market is simply because it's too fucking expensive and you don't
Right.
have healthcare coverage or something like that, do it.
Hmm.
That is the way that we speak with our wallet. So that is what we have to do to inform capitalist nature on how pricing actually works. So I'm with you on that. Like I don't think they're bad. In fact, I don't think most drugs are bad. I think that somebody came to me and was like, "All right, Matt, what do you think about methamphetamine?" I'd be like, "Well, I don't know. What are we using it for?
Feeling
It's
pretty good.
like,
What can I say?
what are we doing with it? I mean, can we tax it a little bit? Like,
Here's
it's
the real
like,
question. They go to you and they go, "What do you think about meth?" And you're like, "Ah." And then they go, "What do you think about morphine?" That's the real
yeah,
question.
yeah,
Or
yeah,
what was it? Vyvanse or Adderall. I
yeah.
guess it's a better example.
Yeah, but most discoveries like this started
Mhm.
out because somebody found something chemically or molecular that's really cool. They're
Yeah.
like, oh, hey, it does this. This is bitchin' stuff. And then we just took it to the nth degree. We're always trying to pursue something. So that goes to our second point, the second point that you made, about using, test stacks,
Yeah.
things like that to like, oh, I'm gonna lose weight because I'm gonna blast free tea for, until my gonadotropin hormone is completely out of control. Like it's that approach, has been around for a while, and human augmentation has been around for a while. Our desire to change who and what we are, at a deeper level to meet something that is inherently inside of us,
Mhm.
that will lead to our happiness and make us feel good about ourselves. That there's nothing wrong with that. And if you are not damaging another person
Mhm.
in doing that, honestly, you knock yourself out.
Yeah.
It's nobody has a position to judge. Like if I've run into dudes so many times shooting up in the gym locker room, getting ready to go out and just I'm gonna outbench everybody in the gym. Yeah, man, you probably are. You're about to throw those bars clean to the ceiling with what you just jacked yourself
Yeah.
into. So I've seen that stuff go on for years, and it won't change. Now it's TRT. You get a bunch of old guys who were like, "Oh man, my testosterone's too low. I'm gonna blast TRT for a while." But what I get concerned about is not the people who are making educated decisions around that. And when I say educated, I mean real education, not Googling something and going to some, muscle and fitness blog or something like that, but reading up on the science,
Mhm.
learning about how it works. What chemical pathways does it interact with? What happens when you take too much or too little? What is too much or too little? So all of those questions that are kind of bounded in actual empirical scientific research. But doing that work You decide, okay, this is something I want to do. Okay, great. As long as it's not impacting the well-being of another human being, then decide to do that. Like that's how freedom should work.
Yeah.
If you want to take 50 GLP-1 pills that you found so that you can blast McDonald's for 3 days and still lose weight, that's
Dude.
great. As long as you're not impacting other people and you're
Yeah.
not damaging other people while you're doing that, that's fantastic. If the same thing when it comes, everybody's shooting deck balls all over the place. It's like, I'm gonna do 5,000 milligrams of deca every day. And I can't, that measurement's way off. I threw that out of my ear and that's not even close.
You just
But
explode.
right, it's just the whole body, you just become like one muscle. But but that decision is
Mhm.
yours and it
Right.
should be yours. And we shouldn't try and moderate or adjust or control any of that. I think that's why a black market exists.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think there's a level of responsibility in making those things available to other people that shouldn't just be driven by capitalism.
Yeah.
Go to your doctor, talk to your doctor, say, hey, Pat, I can't lose weight. I don't know what to do. The first question should be, just like it is with all of the other T stacks that you've been talking about, is have you optimized everything you have right now
Mhm.
before we have to dive into chemistry?
Yeah.
Well, I'm eating healthy and I'm working out and my blood pressure's good and everything else is good and I just can't get rid of fat. All right, well, let's experiment with a lower calorie diet first and see what happens.
Hmm.
Well, I can't do that. Okay, well, then maybe we take a look at drugs. But now we know that you've optimized everything you can. You can't eat less than this for whatever reason it is. The same thing when it comes to any type of performance enhancing drug like steroids or anything like that. Have you optimized everything else? Yeah, I lift, I rest, recover, I do these fundamental recovery exercises and all this other fun stuff, and I'm eating healthy and I'm getting the right amount of sleep, and I'm not doing too much recreational shit that's going to damage my body. All right, well, then maybe you want to take a look at some performance enhancing stuff to get
Yeah.
that next level. But
Yeah.
in some sports, that's cheating. So, you
Yeah. I don't know. I think for me, like this is gonna sound okay, especially since I know a lot of our listeners are older, probably my like parents' generation or my grandparents' generation. And this is gonna sound dumb. All right, but hear me out. I know that it is dumb, but I'm also young enough to not care. So I almost feel like when you talk about like doing recreational things to damage your body, like I almost feel like vices are like not bad, if that makes sense. Because here's my reasoning. Here's my reasoning. Anything within reason, obviously, but there are people out there who do everything right. Like they don't smoke, they don't drink, they work out every day and they still die young, right? And there are people who smoke and drink every day and live a long life. And if the vices or whatever it is, hopefully it's like a healthy vice, maybe have a cigar on a Friday or, maybe have a couple of beers at dinner or whatever. I don't know. Hopefully it's within reason. I think if those, like, again, if they make your life better and you enjoy doing them, like for me, especially like, again, this is going to be like a young person's take. Like, I know that when I'm older, I'll probably wish that, like, or I'd probably have a different opinion. I wish I'd have more years. But like, I almost wish, like, or I would almost trade a shorter life of pure fulfillment and enjoyment for a longer life of just mediocrity, right? Of just, I'm kind of coasting by. And so for you, if you're a listener here and, for you to get peak level enjoyment, you're blasting tea, you're shredded, jacked, pounding whiskeys and smoking cigarettes. Hey, you might die at 40, but those 40 years are going to be great. All right. For me personally, that's probably just a healthy body that gets still mobile. You know what I mean? Maybe kind of on the jack side. I don't know. Hopefully. But the thing is, I think for me, kind of like you were saying, it's just everyone's decision. You know what I mean?
yeah,
It's like be informed, be healthy, or actually, be whatever you want to be, honestly. But if for me, it's like just be happy. I think that's the biggest thing. Where it's like if you are willing to live a potentially shorter life or a harder life, maybe, but these things are, that's a willing trade for you. More power to you. You have the freedom to do that. My grandpa's a saying, "What a king does in his castle is his business,"
okay.
and I fully believe it. Honestly, it's just,
I think what you said
hmm
is what we should cap all this with.
hmm
But just if you're not hurting anybody else, do what makes you happy.
yep,
And don't let other people judge around that. I mean, ultimately, we have to respect other people. That's why if you want to, be drinking whiskey and smoking cigarettes, that's fine. But if people don't want you around because you smell like smoke and they hate it, that's part of the consequence of you doing
yeah,
something that makes you happy. So you got
Yeah.
to be around people that tolerate that.
Hmm.
And I think there's this understanding, there's this thought process where it's like, oh, we have to tolerate everything. Well, that's the intolerance paradox.
Right.
If you tolerate intolerance, then you have created more intolerance.
Yeah.
So I think that though there is a balance to be struck there.
Right.
People can be happy without making other people unhappy, and that's
Yeah.
something we frequently forget. And whether that's, you know, figuring out which quantum computer is better, or riding an automated dick ship up into space,
Mm.
or you know,
GLP-1s.
doing GLP-1s.
Yep.
Whatever makes you happy, chase what makes you happy.
All right, guys. So wrap it up real quick. I know I've been slacking on saying it in the beginning, but if you've listened all the way through, I hope you hear it now. We do have an email at mattandshane@clarify-tech.com. Submit any questions you have there or topics you want discussed. Yeah, so to wrap it up, women in space, quantum computers, GLP-1s and steroids. Yeah. See you guys later.